Welcome back to The Heat. We just heard from the suspended Brazilian president, Dilma Rousseff, as she awaits trial in the Brazilian Senate on impeachment charges. Joining us now in our Washington, D.C. studio is Monica Arruda Almeida. She is an adjunct professor at the Center for Latin American Studies at Georgetown University. From California, we're joined by Maria Luisa Mendonça. She is a professor of international relations at the University of Rio de Janeiro and the director of the Brazilian Network for Social Justice and Human Rights. Also with us is Paulo Sotero. He's the director of the Brazil Institute at the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars right here in Washington. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Paulo, let me start with you. President Rousseff is now facing impeachment charges in the Brazilian Senate. But as we saw in that interview, she is not going to give in easily. She came out swinging. What are the options that she has right now?
To defend herself before the Brazilian Senate that will meet as a court under the presidency of the Chief Justice of Brazil, a man that was nominated, I believe, for former President Lula. And she will have the opportunity to say everything that she said. She will have 20 days to do that and to present her arguments. She will have to convince at least a number of, to prevent 54 senators from approving her removal. She was indicted by the House. Now she has the opportunity to defend herself. And most people in Brazil, most political observers, including some on her own political party, the Workers' Party, believe that she will not be able to reverse the process, that President Dilma Rousseff is basically part of the past. Now, this is a tragic history for Brazil. The first woman president of Brazil, her presidency ending in this way, in an impeachment process that was the second in 24 years, which shows something is wrong with the system. So, but that's what's coming, is an impeachment process. Okay. In the Senate. Right.
Let me bring in Maria out in California. Maria, President Rousseff has framed this as a coup d'etat. She said that several times during the interview. She says that she is fighting an injustice, a profound injustice, as she put it. Has the Brazilian Congress been fair to her?
Yes, I think she was right, because the reason for her impeachment has no legal basis. If the same criteria were applied right now, at least 16 state governors will have to be impeached, also the previous administrations, because what she did is a very common practice. So I think she's right, and if we actually see this happening in Brazil, it will be a very dangerous precedent that would undermine democracy in the whole region. And so I think the reason for the impeachment is key. We need to continue explaining that, and the international community needs to understand that this is a coup because she didn't commit any crime. And we are, Brazil is a presidential system. You cannot impeach a president because she's facing a period of low popularity during her term, or because there is an economic crisis. None of that is a legitimate reason for the impeachment.
Monica, as Maria points out, what the president is accused of doing is common practice. It's been done before. So is this a case where her opponents have figured out a way to actually remove her from power, using the Constitution, using legal means, in essence, carrying out a coup, as she points out?
I mean, in a way it is, because I think that the problem here is not just how she managed the accountings, but it's there are so many other things going on. So you are within a perfect storm in terms of crisis. So you have the case of the Petrobras, right? The corruption case that really, it's underneath all this conflicts between Congress and the president and the country and the administration. And on top of that, you have the economic crisis and the inaction of the government to act in order to stop the the deterioration of the Brazilian accounts. So it's all this together. It just didn't help her. If everything was well, I think one could make the case that if the economy was doing well, if you didn't have the corruption scheme of Petrobras, which is unprecedented in terms of the scale of corruption, just the manipulation of the Brazilian accounts, I think she would be able to, I wouldn't think that she would be impeached by now, right? But you have all these things happening. And what is tragic is that the situation is being deteriorating so much, and the government was completely paralyzed, wasn't reacting enough in order to deal with the economic crisis, right? So there is a sense of urgency to do something before things get worse. For 2 consecutive years, you have a negative growth of almost 4%, which is unthinkable. We never had, the last time you had something like this in Brazil was in the 1930s. Even during the 1980s, during the so-called lost decade, or the 1990s, when you have the financial crisis, you didn't have that type of poor performance. And the government was just not reacting, right? You didn't feel from the government, people didn't see that they were reacting enough.
Paulo, here we have an attempt that is being made to remove an elected president from power. That's pretty serious stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm wondering, she said that her appointment of, at that time, Vice President Michel Temer was a mistake. In fact, she's called him names. She's accused him of being a money launderer and of corruption. Was she outmaneuvered politically here?
Well, Dilma Rousseff is not a politician. She's a technocrat that was anointed out of the blue by the most popular president in Brazilian history to do something that she clearly was not trained and had no temperament of doing, which is to govern a country like Brazil, the size of Brazil, that has no temperament for the give and take on politics, and even without any ideas of corruption. She is simply not fit for that. Now, she has had the reputation of being an excellent manager, a detailed-oriented manager. During this period, when she was Minister of Justice, a member of the board of Petrobras, or head of the Chief of Staff of President Lula and chairperson of the board of Petrobras, or president. This is the period in which this scandal happened, where the largest company in Brazil was assaulted by the tune of $3.5 billion. It was virtually destroyed. President Dilma Rousseff, the detail-oriented manager, has claimed that she didn't know about what was going on in Petrobras. So Brazilians, I think, have the right to be skeptical about this type of explanation. There is another point that's very important when you talk about democracy and the coup or the not coup. Yeah. This is happening under the supervision of a Supreme Court with 11 members. 8 of those members were appointed to those positions by President Dilma and by President Lula. So I think at the trial that will take place in the Senate, I think she will have to decide, or her representatives, to appoint directly to the members of the Supreme Court as being co-conspirators, because that's the only case, the only manner in which she would have a chance, maybe, of convincing some Brazilians. The Supreme Court in Brazil has a lot of credibility. Right. Actually, people applaud the judiciary in Brazil, and so she may try to do that. I believe that she won't do that, as she didn't do it during this interview. I find it very telling that she doesn't attack the judiciary that has said that the process is absolutely constitutional, that it's absolutely legal, and has refused to hear or to accept some appeals that President Dilma's representatives made about the legality of the coup.